the rest of you, all our participants today, it is now the moment where you can write your questions in the chat so that we can hear from our four speakers what their opinion is, anything that you have heard coming up for during those four great talks that we've just heard. And I think one common storyline for all of them has been the misinformation epidemic we've had in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, I can, Miriam, I can, just mention, just to build on Dr. Merten's comments, which were very important. We've been seeing this now also since 2015. What happened in the US was the anti-vaccine movement that's been around for 20 years since the Wakefield paper really accelerated in 2015 by taking on this pivot to political extremism on the far right. And it really happened where I work in Texas and around Oklahoma under this banner that they called medical freedom, health freedom. And it's caused a lot of damage because in 2020, what was anti-vaccine then glommed on protests against masks and social distancing. So it became a full-on anti-science movement, which was then built upon by the White House last year. That really created a full-on disinformation campaign. And I could see it coming because, and I have a daughter with autism and I have 4 adult kids, one with autism, and I wrote a book called Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism, which put me front and center going up against these groups. And now they publicly call me the OG villain, the original gangster villain. So you're hearing from the original gangster villain today. But the other interesting twist that I'd be curious to hear what the others have to say is what was kind of walled off to the US and North America moved into Western Europe over the summer last year. And you started to see anti-mask, anti-vaccine rallies in Paris, in Berlin, where they stormed the Reichstag actually, and the German Parliament, and London and Trafalgar Square, and it had all the elements of the U.S.-based anti-vaccine with the link to the far political right, the QAnon links. So I'm quite concerned that we're seeing this globalization of anti-science, and it's becoming incredibly damaging. And the WHO recognized it in 2019. They added vaccine hesitancy as one of their top 10 global health threats. But now this has gone way beyond that. And so, the conspiracies, that's got Bill Gates or Tony Fauci or me sticking chips into people, and or we're concocting viruses up in Area 51. It seems the more outrageous they are, the more believable they are, and that is also very troubling. So how do we sort of put it all back, and what is the role in taking down the fact that this now dominates the internet? By some accounts, there's 480 now anti-science websites, all revved up on Facebook, and Amazon.com is basically an anti-science website if you go to the books on vaccinations and other items. I'm just curious about that. What others think?
Sonja, do you may want to respond to that? I think it's very close to your topic.
Yes, no, I think we need to build on the fact that a lot of people actually don't follow those anti-science talks. So it's all over in the internet, as you correctly say. But nonetheless, there are, for most of the people, the majority of the people, it's still nothing more than a rumor. I think we need to be very clear about this. Not half of the population will start to believe in this. That's probably for sure. It's a minority, and a very loud minority, but it is still a minority. And also, when you have seen all those demonstrations, it has not really, until now at least, developed into a very large, very strong movement. I think, on the other hand, what we need to consider is really that there are people who are at the lower side of the social ladder, and there might be a more desperation, more anger, and that's something that we can tackle by trying to strive for greater social justice, trying to get those people back to trust the governments and all the efforts that the health systems make currently to combat the pandemic.
Bassirou, I think you have to add to that, right?
Yes. Yes, I just want to comment on that and highlight the importance of trust, because science has gone into the public arena, and everybody think that the information coming from science is something that you can use, or you can use your own knowledge without testing. But the important thing here, if I look at our context, we look at some countries that are democratic and those countries which are what we call dictatorial countries. And the message or the information we are having now is to balance the freedom of people with public health. And when we see that some countries said we cannot afford, because we are poor, to make that some people freedom affects the public health. So that's why you see that in most of the countries, the measures are reinforced, affecting sometimes people's freedom. I'm currently in Togo. If you don't wear a mask in the public area or in the transport, you have a fine of something like $6 that you have to pay, and it's not negotiable. So sometimes we have to differentiate between what are the limits of people's freedom and the community health. And it's a very big issue that we need to address. And we don't know where to put the border between freedom and the public health. Thank you.
I think I want to give that right over to Rudi, because I think this is a big question that has very much to do with what our culture values, whether it be individual freedom or a collective sort of safety approach, and maybe in a more sort of global way to give your view on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. The issue of people not taking up the vaccine is going to become a fairly major issue. And sometimes it pains me to hear, even at WHO, when people say, well, I don't believe in vaccines. It's like, wait a minute, there's nothing to believe, you know, you have data and you can judge. But if people are not taking up the vaccine, we will never get the coverage rates that we need to come to an end of this epidemic. And we see this with measles. We can't get rid of measles because theoretically you could. If everybody gets vaccinated, then that's the end of measles. And we see this in polio. But for the COVID-19, if large sort of proportions of people in different countries will not get the vaccine, there will be large numbers of people that are susceptible, and we will have more and more outbreaks. So that is a problem. We are trying to address that by providing good information. But as you know, there's the non-believers. You can provide whatever information. People are not taking that up quite often, and you see the problem is that people get their news from alternative sources, and as we have seen recently, even the facts are different that people refer to. And that's a real problem that we have to address. I mean, WHO, of course, when you go to the website, you see the infodemic sort of part of it that tries to address that. But in the end, you know, yes, we always think we can count on common sense, which, as it happens, is not so common as we think, unfortunately. So we are working on that at WHO. It's by no means a battle that is won, but I think we will have to win this battle in the long run if we want to come to the end of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much. And I already see, Bassirou, you want to add to that, right?
Yes, I just want to add, I'm seeing Jurg Singer, the director of Swiss TPH. Maybe he could also, if it's possible, elaborate on that. When we look at the vaccine debate, it's more a biomedical approach. And that's why sometimes people tend to see that biomedical approach is linked to the business approach. So we are not seeing a socio-cultural approach that bring people or that bring scientists or even actors to understand what are the behavior of people and what is changing internally in people for all of a sudden refusing vaccines or refusing barriers. And there's a huge area of research to understand what is changing, because if we fail to do that, we think that the biomedical approach will not solve alone the problem. That's why I said vaccines are necessary but not sufficient. Other measures taking into account socio-cultural determinants are very, very important to consider. Thank you.
I mean, one of the aspects that I've noticed is how these anti-science movements, especially around vaccines, have become multidimensional. So in the US now, we've done a study with a group at Texas A&M, and it's exactly the same as what the Kaiser Family Foundation found, which was they identified two groups that are most vaccine hesitant. It was called what we called the Trump voters, what Kaiser called Republicans, again, out of this health freedom, medical freedom movement, and then the African American community in the US, which, and the legacy of Tuskegee and but also the specific targeting of African American communities by anti-vaccine groups that hosted rallies in Harlem, New York, and other African American communities. So I think those are two big pieces of this. But the other is the international aspect and the rallies, but also what the Russian government has been doing with this. What there's even a name for it now called weaponized health communication, where the Russian government is specifically, piling on in democratic governments a lot of anti-vaccine, anti-science disinformation on the internet. And I think this is also very damaging. And the irony, of course, is when they released their Gamaleya vaccine, they were astonished that people were critical of it when they really created that monster, which was this whole distrust of vaccines, and all of a sudden they're shocked that people are not accepting of the Gamaleya vaccine. So that was really an ironic aspect. I think what we, I would not underestimate the impact of this. And I've been an advocate in the U.S. government without much success because, a lot of the discussion in the U.S. is around we have to amplify our pro-vaccine message, fine-tune our message. And I say, look, guys, this is a message in bottles floating in the Atlantic Ocean. Unless you do something about the ocean, it's not going to have an impact. And I'm of the opinion, and and admittedly I'm an outlier here, that we have to do something about taking down the anti-vaccine content, at least in the US, on the internet, and do something about Russia. And then, with this group, what I would say is, we also have to start beginning to look at this globally. And I would like to see an interagency task force at the UN look at this in a more substantive way, because it goes beyond the health sector. It's not only the health sector. I mean, the health sector is not going to deal with how you confront Russia about what they're doing. And it's not only Russia, there are other governments as well. And how you address issues around justice, around the economic aspects. And so it really even goes beyond just the remit of the World Health Organization, I think, and how we begin to look at that in a substantive way.
Thank you very much, Peter. We're already running a little bit late, and I think those were great closing words. And for those of you not joining, and also for our four speakers, I really want to thank you for being here today. From all the different parts of the world that you made it happen, even though I think we all would have preferred to see us in real life.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.